Right, we'll just wait for a few minutes for more people to join us. I can see that there are still people joining. So we're just waiting for more people to join just before we start.
Good afternoon. I see a few familiar names in the chat. It's lovely that you can join us.
So welcome to our session. This session is about supporting language teachers with international partnerships. My name's Vicky Goff and I'm from the British Council, and welcome also to Susie Buell, who's a language teacher and also a British Council ambassador. If you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us about any international partnerships that you have and the kind of work that you do with them, that would be great. So first of all, I'm going to give a bit of a background about how to find a partner school, and then some practical advice for those planning visits and exchanges in 2022. And then Susie is going to continue with some examples from her school of her international partnerships. And then after that, we'll have some questions. Okay. But please ask any questions in the chat as you go along or in the Q&A box, and we can answer some of them as we go along. And I can't make my PowerPoint move. So I'm so sorry. I think I'll stop sharing and start it again. So the first thing to talk about is how can I find a partner school? Unfortunately, since we no longer have access to e-twinning, we're not able to use that to find partners, but there are other ways of doing it. So the British Council does have a partner finding tool, and you can see the information there on how to access that. If you're particularly looking for a partnership in France, then this might be a good link to use. This is the link to the DARIC, the various DARIC, the international education offices in each of the academies. And so if you know the particular area of France that you would like a link in, this might be a good way to find a link with a school in France. If you're looking for a link in Germany, UK-German Connection is a good place to find a link. And if you're looking for a link in Spain, the Spanish Embassy Education Office is a good place to start. And I have those, those links there for you to use. And I'll copy those into the chat in a moment. And then also, another way of doing it is to make your own link. So it might be that your town has a twinning link or some sort of area link that you can tap into. If you're a primary school, your local secondary school might have a link that you can link to their feeder schools. Also within your wider school community, there may be people that have links. I think sometimes having a personal connection to make that link sometimes is a good thing. So please share in the chat giving information about any ways you've found your partner school and how you might advise others to find a link. The Turing programme for 2022, the government has just announced allocation of budget to support the Turing scheme for the next 3 years. We don't have any information yet on the programme or any deadlines, but if you are planning an application, please keep an eye on the website and information will appear. We hope before the end of the year or in early 2022. However, there are some things that you can do in advance to prepare for a future application. So be in contact with your partner school and check that they can host you. If you don't have a partner school, try and make contact with one and maybe using the ideas that I gave you earlier. Check the FCDO regulations on the country you wish to visit. It might be better you might find it that you have to change country rather than going to Latin America. You might need to go to Spain instead, depending on the regulations in those countries. So it's worth considering that, and start to think about the kind of program that you might like to have for your visit. Many people last year applied to Turing for their school exchange and were successful in getting a grant and hope to travel in 22. And we also have a number of people who had applied a year ago for the international school exchanges and are hoping to take their postponed visit forward. So what I'm going to do now is to give some practical guidance for visits and exchanges. First of all, looking at COVID. And the first thing to say is that in spite of what you may hear, it is allowed to do a school visit in 2022. There are just some things that you need to take into consideration. The DFE has funded schools via Turing and so on to take part in school exchanges and school visits. So it is something that you are allowed to do. So first of all, in terms of regulations, there's no point in me going through the regulations for each country at this point, as they will change and they will continue to change. So you need to keep in touch with what's on the FCDO site. So, and remember also to look at the regulations for any country that you may be transiting through. Remember that you may need to change accommodation plans. So if you are planning to do homestays, it may be that the school you are planning to visit don't want to do homestays at this particular point, and you may need to make other arrangements. What we have found is that some countries don't accept the one dose which we're giving to our 12 to 15-year-olds as fully vaccinated. And so they may be considered unvaccinated, and so we'll still need to do the PCR test option. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And also you need to think about the staff pupil ratio in case someone gets ill or any pupil needs to return or isolate. The next thing to think about is in terms of documents for travel. Now that we've left the European Union, you will need to check that everyone has their own passports. The only exception for that will be that in some EU countries, you can use group passports. And those countries are Austria, Denmark, France, Italy, Malta, Norway, Romania, Spain, and Switzerland. So you can use a collective passport for those countries, which costs £39 and takes 6 weeks to be processed. But any pupils who are from third countries, who are legally resident in the UK, will have to have their own valid passport that contains an endorsement that they have right to remain. So for all other countries to enter the European Union, you'll need to have a full passport valid for at least a further 6 months and less than 10 years old. So that's passports and group passports. You need to see what visas you would need for countries outside Europe. The list of travellers, which many people had used in the past to take groups, is no longer valid, so you can't use the list of travellers anymore. And programmes like Turing and like our International School Exchanges programme will make allowances for disadvantaged pupils to allow them to buy a passport as part of the grant. So that's worth considering with your funder if you're being funded to do these visits. If you have an EHIC and you're a current EHIC and you're traveling to a European country, you can still use it if the end date hasn't passed. Otherwise, you'll need to apply for a GHIC, and that works in Europe, but also worldwide. You also need to think about travel insurance, obviously, and think about different roaming charges on telephones. And in terms of visits and exchanges, if you are doing a visit to a partner school in 22, it may be that the time you can spend in the partner school won't be as great as it would have been beforehand. The school might not want to spend so much time in close contact with visitors. So one thing to think about might be, can you extend the preparatory work and the follow-up activities to still ensure that you have lots and lots of contact with overseas pupils, and that the visit still provides an intercultural experience for the pupils that you're working with. Now, all of this makes it sound very complicated, and it may well be more complicated than it has been in previous years. And so the question is, why should I bother? And I think that we all know the answer is that it can be a life-changing experience for the young people concerned. And that's the reason why we want to make all of these things happen for the young people. So I'm going to post some useful links and so on into the chat. But if you have any questions, please save them to the end, and we can answer them after Susie has talked about her part. So I'm going to stop sharing now, Susie, and I'm going to go to the chat and post the links. And so over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm just waiting for my presentation to load, hopefully. There we go. So I've entitled my section Global Glee, Cultural Capital and the International Schools Award. And as Vicky said, I'm first and foremost a teacher, but I also have a background in teacher education. And one of my huge driving forces in the 21 years that I have been teaching has been culture and international partnerships. I just wanted to share this with you to start with. Oh, gone forward too quickly. This is an article that I wrote in the first lockdown that we had last March for the Association for Language Learning. I am actually the honorary membership officer for the association, and if anyone on the call would like to know more about the association, please do drop me a message in the chat. But this was an article where I think that the key takeaway was around a kind of a metaphor for language learning. And I think at the moment there's a lot of talk about the language learning as being a bit like building a house, and that the key components are high frequency vocabulary, grammar and phonics. And I think, rightly so, they are the foundations on which we build. But I would personally argue that adding culture into the mix turns that house into a home. It just gives your language lessons that little bit of something extra. And for me, it's never been an add-on. It's always been a very integral part of my language lessons. I try, where possible, to include some elements of culture into every lesson that I teach. And I see it very much as a golden thread. So, as Vicky said, we are sadly no longer part of eTwinning, but that was really where my international partnership work started many years ago. And here you can see a picture of one of our current partner schools. I think this is actually a view from one of the classroom windows, so it's obviously very close to the beach. And this is in Guadeloupe, an overseas French department. This is actually a partnership that we formed a number of years ago, and I worked with my Year 4 class at the time on a project called Nos Amis en Guadeloupe, Sharing Our Lives, Sharing Our Traditions. And you can see here from the photograph, it was a very simple project whereby we would send our little eTwinning teddy bear backwards and forwards, and the children would write very basic postcards, sometimes in English, sometimes in French. And we would also send each other various tourist information. I think you can see again from the photo on the right, we sent them a little booklet which had some of the smells of York, and it was a kind of scratch and sniff guide so that they could not only find out about York, but also have a little smell of some of the key landmarks. What I should say was that the partnership work really enhanced the language lessons as a whole. So I was quite fortunate in my setting. I would see my Year 4 children at least 2 or 3 times a week. And using my school blog, which at the time was minsterfrench.wordpress.com, I would often post links to maps, YouTube videos. And I'm not sure if you're aware as a languages teacher, but there is a brilliant website, which I think has now been archived, which was the BBC Clip Zone. And again, there are some fantastic, perhaps slightly dated clips on there where you can find out a bit more about the wider French, Spanish and German speaking world. So I suppose what I'm saying is that the partnership work was something that then fed into many of my lessons. It wasn't just something that we did as an add-on or an extra. We also use technology to share things a little bit more quickly than posting. So we used a Padlet like the screenshot that I've got here. And this is something that both of the partner teachers had access to. So our partner school teacher in Guadeloupe would post, for example, about La Toussaint. And then from our side, you can see probably about this time, 2 years ago, we shared with them a little bit about what we were doing in year 6 on Le Jour du Souvenir. So just another way of sharing that perhaps is a little bit more effective in terms of time than perhaps having letters sent backwards and forwards to overseas territories. This screenshot here is of a tweet from the Minster School. You can see from the looks on the children's faces, they were so excited to receive an actual parcel, and very kindly the partners school had posted, as well as the postcards, which had fantastic views of the many different parts of Guadeloupe, but also some souvenirs which the children were delighted with. It also happened to coincide with a visit from John Rolfe MBE from the British Council, and so he got to witness the children opening their parcels, and at the same time came to present us with our International Schools Award, which I will talk about a little bit later. At the time, I also worked in a second primary school, Lady Lane Park School, over in Bingley in West Yorkshire. And at this point, I used the British Council to help me to connect with a school in Martinique. And again, looking at the resource at the bottom of the page, you can see that within my language lessons, as well as having the opportunity to write letters and postcards and have those sent backwards and forwards, we also would look, for example, at poetry in French in a very basic form about Martinique, and find out a little bit more about the culture and the festivals and so on. More recently, I have managed to find a partner in Rwanda, and this was through the Connecting Classrooms and Global Learning links through the British Council. Sadly, the application deadlines have now passed, and this programme is going to be coming to an end in December of this year, but potentially may be replaced with something else. But again, we're waiting for confirmation. But you can see from the next slide, my smiley face, and this is Marie-Jean, our partner school head teacher. This was our very first WhatsApp call, where again, through the wonder of technology, we had an initial chat about our partnership, about the work that we would do at my school in Harrogate with Gisenyi College in Rwanda. So a really great partnership there, and formed very much as a collaborative effort, where our focus actually in this project is to do with the sustainable development goals of equality between boys and girls, and also quality education. So on the next slide, you can see I currently teach in a secondary setting at St John Fisher Catholic High School in Harrogate. I've been there since September 2020. So obviously last year was a bit of a strange year, but I still felt really strongly about giving my students an opportunity to partner with schools abroad. So I've worked really hard over the last 12 months, and again, with the help of the British Council, I've managed to secure a partnership link for every single year group that I teach. The main question that I get asked around this is, does this not take a huge amount of time and energy alongside your already very busy teacher role? And I would say that there is an element of planning, and there is obviously an element of time that I need to dedicate to maintaining communication and making sure that that these partnerships are secure, and that they do what I want them to do. But because I try to focus my lessons very much around these countries, as much as it is extra work, I think when you see the looks on the students' faces, the excitement that I feel when I get an email from one of my partner school links, I think it's worth every single second. So in year 7, this is a long established link with a school in Marseille. I think in 2007, I went on a partner finding session in Leeds and met a lovely teacher called Veronique, who I am still very much in touch with. And so my current year 7s and her equivalent students are twinning, finding out about each other, finding out about mainland France, and we are focusing that around basic greetings, getting to know each other, very much around the vocab that we are studying in our lessons at present. In year 8, as I mentioned, my partner teacher is Marie-Jean, the head teacher of Jinseni Collège. And with my year 8s, we are currently working on leisure and free time. So again, we're sharing not only what we like to do in our free time, but also some of those sustainable development goals which we each share. My year 10s are very fortunate in that they have a link with the school in La Réunion. And again, we are looking at leisure and free time. In year 11, our partner school link is in Senegal. And this is a really great link because school life in Senegal is markedly different to the school life that we are used to in the UK. So that's been really interesting. And then the most recent partner school link has been with my year 12 class with Morocco. And actually in 2 weeks' time, we have a plan and video conference link where actually the students are going to get to meet each other live online, technology permitting. I've just this morning done the 3rd and final day of the Global Teacher Award at level 2, and again that's the kind of thing that I have discovered through the work of the British Council as recognition of the international school work that I am committed to in my school. I should say also at this point that a lot of the work that I do around the Francophone world would not really be possible without the support of Mary Glasgow magazines, and I've put the link there at the bottom of the page. So here you have got an example of something that I might use in one of my languages lessons. So for example, I said that one of our partner schools, my year 11s, have got a link with Senegal. So when I'm talking about leisure, I might use an article like this one in my lessons so that when they are talking about leisure, they're not just focusing on France, but they're thinking about what children in other parts of the Francophone world might do in their free time. And I should say at this point, I'm predominantly a French teacher, but these magazines are also available in Spain, so looking at the wider Spanish-speaking world and also in German. Mary Glasgow magazines have very kindly offered language show participants a 15% off subscription offer. I will share this presentation link with you in the chat later. So if you want to make a note of that code, Mary15, please do. It is worth every penny. Again, on the left-hand side, you can see a link to another article that I've used from a Mary Glasgow magazine, where as a starter task, I've had the children try to link up the photos with the sentences, focus around the flag of Senegal, for example, and get them to locate where Senegal is in the world. And I should also say at this point that we don't shy away in my lessons from the colonial past of the French. We do talk about La Traite Négrière, we do talk about L'Île de Gorée, and I think the children cope with that in a very mature and contained fashion. A very good friend of mine who I have come to know through social media, Elizabeth Porter, she's put together this amazing pack all about Senegal. So again, we've used that quite often in our language lessons just to enhance the cultural awareness and just to bring that partnership link alive. With my year 8s last year, as I said, we have the link with Rwanda. So I have been in touch with a famous singer from Rwanda, and with his permission, we have been using one of his songs. So the students have been getting to know a little bit about the music and the musical traditions of Rwanda, sorry. And then on the right-hand side, I was very fortunate to have a trainee languages teacher in my classroom last year, and he was very, very keen to engage in international work. So when we were studying the topic of technology, he thought that it would be a good opportunity for the children to perhaps locate some of the African Francophone nations, and also to perhaps dispel any stereotypes that they might have about Rwanda by teaching them a little bit about how technology plays a huge, important role in some of the cities and the capital city. If you are a French teacher, you will probably also know about the Institut Français du Royaume-Uni French pop music competition. My schools over the last 3 or 4 years have entered at least one or more classes every year. And again, I've used this as an opportunity to link to not only the partner school work that we've been doing about equality. You can see the song on the left-hand side. This was something that we devised as a class. So with my help, the students have come up with a song about liberté, égalité, bonheur, what it is to be happy, and about freedom of choice. And then on the right-hand side, a very simple song about some of the countries where French is spoken, and that was written by one of my Year 8 classes, again with a little bit of help and support from myself. Just another couple of screenshots of some of the articles that I have used in my language lessons. So a very short piece there on the left-hand side about Lora from the island of La Réunion. It's an island that is very close to my heart because it's where I got married many, many years ago. So it still holds a very special place in my heart. And again, as you can see on the right-hand side, a slightly more complex article about l'île de la Réunion. So some of the sights, some of the smells, some of the sounds, the food, etc. And as a starter task, this is really engaged, and I think the children really appreciate the efforts that I go to as their French teacher to open their eyes to the wider world that is out there. This photo always makes me smile. This is myself, my head teacher at the time, Mademoiselle Choucroune, and John Rolfe MBE, who you can see on Twitter at Yorkshire John. John came to my school back in November of 2018 to present us with the International Schools Award at foundation level. In fact, I think the award ceremony this year is very soon. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think it might be next week. And so he came and presented that with us. Again, it was a great opportunity to celebrate languages and international learning in our school context. And for me, what came out of his comments was this idea of bringing the world daily into my classroom, and about how important it is in the current climate post-Brexit to develop proactive global citizens. In my current setting, I haven't yet applied for the International Schools Award, but I should say that if you have a link with a partner school abroad and you are doing even the most basic of activities, you would qualify for the International Schools Award at foundation level, and it is completely free of charge and very fuss-free to apply. That's me for now, susiebuell@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter, and you've got a link there to my languages blog. I generally tag most of my posts with the hashtag cultural capital, just to try and keep everything in one place. So I'm going to stop sharing just there, and then I think Vicky and I are going to very happily take any questions, or just take a look in the chat to see if you have got any comments or questions that you might like to ask of us. Okay.
Susie, there's a couple of questions for you. The first one is, are your partnerships sustained only through language lessons, or do other teachers get involved? This is from a primary teacher who struggles to fit everything into the 30 to 50 minute lesson per week.
It's a really good question. When I was in a primary setting, as I say, I was very lucky to have 3, sometimes 4 lessons a week. It was a private school setting, but I appreciate that in your average primary school, you're probably looking at about 30 minutes on average, and then maybe little bits here and there throughout the week. In a secondary setting, it is very much me. My colleagues are on board in the sense that they are keen to develop their work around the wider French, Spanish-speaking world. But I think it is something that is driven by individual teachers. I think as much as I would like to encourage my whole school to get involved, I think you're right. I think teachers are very busy. We're very time poor. And I think you have to have a taste of it yourself to then get the bug, and then be prepared to put in the extra time and energy that it takes. I hope that answers your question. But any support that you would like as a British Council ambassador, please do take my details, and I'll be more than happy to talk you through that in a bit more detail, if that would be helpful.
And there's another one asking if you've ever set up a partnership as part of an after-school club. Would that be something that's possible?
Now, I haven't, but it was something that I thought about doing during lockdown, and then obviously the government announced that we would be going back into school, and so it didn't actually happen. But I think absolutely it could be something for an after school club. I think you would then probably be likely to get the very keen children who are really engaged in this. And then I think what I found with other clubs where it's been extracurricular, so I used to run a wellbeing and happiness club, is that you would start with very small numbers, and then the word gets around about how exciting it is and how the children are really enjoying it, and then your numbers grow automatically. So yeah, I would definitely encourage that. I think wherever you can squeeze it in, it is absolutely worthwhile. And I just would say I've put the link in the chat just now to my presentation. So any links, those articles from Mary Glasgow and so on, you can access that freely. And I think we'll be sharing our presentations with Jonathan from the Language Show too. Any advice for English teachers teaching English Russian school kids? So I'm guessing, Anna, that you would want to twin with a teacher who is teaching English. I don't know whether you might know, I doubt there's very much Russian being taught in secondary schools, but that's not to say that it isn't happening somewhere. I think if we could maybe take your details, Anna, we could certainly ask around within the languages community and see if we could find anybody who would like to set up a link with you. I know it doesn't necessarily have to be in Russian. It might just be another school where English is the main language spoken as a foreign language. Any thoughts on that, Vicky?
I haven't quite understood whether it's looking for a British school where Russian is taught. There are, as you said, there are very few, but I'm sure we could probably try and find some if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm just looking back at Marion's comment about the sustainability, and I agree, Marion. I think if you are able to get another colleague, another ally on side, I think that would be great. And also the way that you could then use that as an opportunity to not only see it as something that you could do in your language lessons, so to enhance the German, but maybe there might be an opportunity for another teacher in your partner school who is, I don't know, say the teacher of history or geography, to do some sort of a project with one of your history or geography teachers. I know in primary it's slightly more complex, isn't it? Because you often have a teacher who teaches pretty much everything on the curriculum apart from maybe languages and music and sport. I thought we had a poll, but I'm not sure that it's here. Can you see it along the bottom, Vicky? We were going to ask a poll around what you are currently doing. So I think Vicky put in the chat a question around, do any of you currently have any partnership links, or are you planning any visits or exchanges? I don't know if anybody would like to make a comment in the chat.
And someone's asked the question, how can we find schools now e-twinning isn't open to us? The school we were partnered with in France has invited us into their project, but I was wondering about finding new partners in more exotic Francophone countries. I posted a link right at the beginning. So if it's a French territory overseas, you might be, I'll go back and I'll post the link for that. So it's the international education offices in the French Academy. So that might be a good way to try and find one that's a French territory overseas. Susie, how did you find your link with Senegal?
The link with Senegal wasn't actually through the British Council. It was a bit of a strange one. I think we had a chat a few conferences ago about a website called Hey Go, which is, I think in lockdown, like most of us, I had terrible wanderlust and I was tired of not being able to travel anywhere. And so I found this wonderful website where it's by donation and you get a host who will take you on a visit of Dakar or anywhere you can think of in the world, a visit of Montmartre in Paris. Just absolutely wonderful. And I've done one actually in lesson time. But generally speaking, I just did it out of my own interest. I wanted to find out a bit more about Senegal. And the guy who hosted the tour, I contacted outside of the visit and said, it was actually a visit of a primary school, and I said, would you happen to have a link to a teacher or the head teacher of this school? And thankfully the head teacher got in touch with me. I passed on my details through the host, and that's how the partnership began. But again, because of COVID, because of different start times in the school year, I think they've only literally just gone back to school after their summer break. It hasn't been 100% straightforward, but I'm absolutely convinced it will be worth it, and we've been preparing for that over the last few weeks. I think Vicky's just popped that link in there about where to perhaps find those overseas partnerships. But I agree that the more exotic the Francophone country, not necessarily the better. I think I've had some amazing partnerships with schools in France. I don't dismiss that at all. But I think because I'm always trying to convince my older learners that there is a whole world of French-speaking people out there, I think the best way that I can encourage them to take their language learning further, even if it's just that they want to travel to the Francophone world in the future, they might not necessarily take their languages to A level. I think very few of them will. But if I can instill that sense of being a global citizen and wanting to perhaps use what little bit of French they've got in the future to help them to navigate conversations in French-speaking Africa or the French Caribbean or wherever they might find themselves on their travels, then I think that's a job well done.
I agree, absolutely. Are there any other questions or comments that people have?
We've got about another 8 minutes, so please do ask away.
Or Susie, any advice for you about how to get things started in your school with international links and visits?
Well, I think, as I said earlier when Marion asked the question about having, is it just you sustain these partnerships, or is it a school-wide thing? I think within my school there's a very big drive currently around cultural capital, so giving children extended opportunities that perhaps they wouldn't get, and particularly post-COVID. So I think I definitely have always seen my role as a languages teacher as trying to extend their cultural awareness, even if it wasn't called cultural capital at the time. That was my aim, and so I've always done that, and the British Council have been hugely helpful in that whole process, and continue to be so. But I would say that I think that the main point, if you're starting out on this journey of international partnership, is just to start small. So even if it's planning in the next few weeks and months to try and find a partner school and spend a good amount of time, working out that the partnership is equitable, that you're getting just as much from it as your partner school is abroad, and maybe just having something like the International Day of Francophonie, which is in March. So thinking ahead to March, giving yourself a good couple of months lead in so that you can do your background information, you can find a partner school, and then having one specific activity that you'd like to engage in on that day. And then I think, as with our partnership link in Rwanda, we started very small with, just a kind of getting to know each other activity. And then that's grown to a point where we're now, integrating things around the Sustainable Development Goals. We're sending each other things backwards and forwards and so on. I've just seen a question from Karen. I think it says, how do you get around reluctance from leadership team and IT teams for safeguarding and GDPR? Do you ask for parental permission? In my current context, I don't. I think if we were to go online, if it was going to be a video link, I probably would, just to cover myself. But I would say that my senior management team are really, they're really encouraging. I don't ask anything of them. It's not something that's going to cost them any money. The Connecting Classrooms and Global Learning project, we actually got, I think, £400 for our virtual project. So that's actually helped buy resources and so on. So that there are small pots of money out there as well that perhaps you can access. But I think I've always just been very adamant that it's too good an opportunity to miss. So I don't think I ever really take no for an answer. But I've been told in the past that there will be IT issues. We're not going to be able to use Skype in school, or there might be firewalls because of Zoom. And I think if you're really adamant that it's a good idea, you will find a way around it. But I think, my advice probably would be to get the IT technician on side. So I quite often take cake and bribes to the IT department, and whenever I have any issues, they've always been fantastic. But you do probably need to try and get your leadership team on side. I think Vicky's put in the chat a toolkit around.
Yeah, there's a toolkit around school visits, really. So and there's also a leaflet that ASCL put together, so the Association of School and College Leaders, for head teachers around school visits and homestay, which can be really useful to talk to the leadership team with. That's directly aimed at head teachers. But there is increasing, pieces of information about the benefits of international links in giving people lots and lots of different skills, and as Susie was saying, raising cultural capital, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, I would use that as a driver. I think if you're looking to convince your school, use the buzzwords if need be. Use the fact that it's going to increase cultural capital.
Yeah. Melanie's asked
refer to the national curriculum, which very much talks about breaking away from a feeling of insularity, giving pupils opportunities to connect with other students abroad. That it's in government guidance. So I think you've got a couple of things there that would certainly stand you in good stead if you're having to fight your corner. There's a question about Brexit as well. Do you think Brexit has or is going to have an impact on the amount of international engagements, partnerships with European countries abandoned or dropped by language teachers? I would hope not.
At the moment, we can see from language trends that the amount of international schools with international partnerships and so on has declined a lot. But some of that, I think, is due to COVID. So we need to think what will happen over the next year or so. What we do know is that with the new visa and passport requirements, it's more expensive now for overseas groups of school children to come into the UK. So we need to wait when the COVID regulations settle down to see if that has some kind of impact. They can no longer just come using their identity cards, but will need to get passports and so on. So that those kind of things may make a difference. We'll need to see what happens. But I think for what we would hope at the British Council and the people like Susie who are our ambassadors, we would hope that now more than ever, it's important to have links with European countries. And we know that it can be a huge motivator for language learning. Often having that contact with a native speaker, whether it's through a virtual project or actually making a visit, can make a huge impact on people. Like me, after one of my school exchanges, that's what brings language learning alive and made me want to do it for the rest of my life.
Exactly, and I'm still very much in touch with my pen friend Katy, who I met in the sixth form. And I think when I think of how long we've sustained that friendship and how much that friendship means to me, I think that the look on the children's faces when their envelopes come, their reaction when they see that the handwriting is very different and sometimes illegible. We often get treats and things, and the sweets are different, and the chocolates are not what we would eat in the UK. Just all of that sense of, these are children that are in so many ways like me, but there are some things about their lives and the way that they conduct their lives that are different. And I find that fascinating. And I think the children see that through the fact that I'm willing to invest my time and energy in setting that up for them and hopefully allowing them to have that same sense of excitement that I had when I first met Katy back in, the 1990s, whatever that was.
So I think we've got 2 minutes left. So I'd just like to really say thank you so much for coming and listening to us. Please, if you can, think about getting a school partner, making internationalism really part of the work that you do in your school. And any way that the British Council can help you with that, we'd be really pleased to do that. I'll post my email in the chat. Susie, any final comments from you?
Yeah, I was just going to say I've done exactly the same. My email is susiebuell@gmail.com. Because it's something that I feel so passionate about. If any of you do feel that you would like to get in touch to have some support or just ask any questions that might occur to you after the call has ended, then please do. And I've put the link there again for you, Mabel, to the presentation that I delivered, and that's got the Merry Glasgow magazine links and also the Money Off code.
And remember that although it's difficult, it might be possible to do visits and exchanges later on in 22, and those might change some pupils into language learners, the language learners of the future and the language teachers of the future. So it might be worth thinking about. It might be worth really pushing to try and do in your school, and we'll help you in any way we can with that.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Have a great rest of conference, everybody. And as I say, please do get in touch if you can. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.